Hello, this is Chaplin's Compass, where we are navigating the global landscape of spiritual health and care. I'm John Betz.
And I'm Tremaine.
And in this podcast, one of the key pieces that we're going to be unpacking is learning more about our own experiences within chaplaincy. Both Alice and I have served as chaplains in various different contexts. And one of the things that we wanted to share, which might be helpful for people who are listening, because it might accord with what you've experienced as a chaplain, or you might have differing viewpoints, is that we want to discuss some of the areas where we've provided spiritual, religious, or humanist care. So some of the areas that we're going to focus on include times when we've had formative or meaningful stories, providing care for others. Another one will include some of our most difficult encounters. Then we'll finish with the most unusual, the challenging, the odd, or the funny encounters. So I'm excited about this because I love hearing, well, chaplains are known for being storytellers. And so I love the opportunity to hear your story, Alice, and I have some that I would love to share. So yeah, I'd love to. So if you wanted, would you like to share a time when you've had a very formative or meaningful story or providing care for somebody?
You know, John, I was thinking about that this weekend when we started talking about sharing stories. And first, my mind went to some end of life. It's interesting to me. I've realized that some of the most formative encounters that I had were also some very ordinary visits, very ordinary encounters. Last time we were talking on our first episode, I mentioned that when I was training as a resident, that I really struggled with the fact that I couldn't measure how helpful I was being to a patient as well as a nurse or a doctor could. And I think it's because, it's important to me to know if I'm doing a good job, that I'm doing a good job, and that I'm adding value and contributing to something. Exactly because of that, the encounters that I've had that have been so meaningful and formative for me as a chaplain have been those encounters that have really changed the way that I see the role of a chaplain, and that I've realized the identity that I carry as a chaplain is more important than even the interventions that I provide at times. So I'll tell you about these. There are two that are kind of similar. One is there was an older man that the nurse had asked me to come see at the hospital, and she said, he's very cantankerous, he's very depressed. Can you go and speak to him or see how he's doing? So I stopped by and I listened to him, and he said he was ready to give up on God. He was ready to give up on life because he felt like God had abandoned him. He felt God had given up on him. He was having a lot of health struggles and had significant losses. So I listened and we talked. At some point I prayed with him and I left, and it was a very ordinary visit, honestly. Things that chaplains do every day, all day. And the next day I came back and checked on him, and he said, when you prayed with me yesterday, I know that God was in that prayer. And because I know God was in that prayer, I know that God must have sent you to me. And when he said that, I realized that it wasn't so much what I did in the visit or what I said or even how I prayed with him that made the biggest difference. It was the fact that me carrying in the role of chaplain reminded him that God was thinking about him, that God thought of him enough, that God had sent somebody so he was not forgotten. He was not abandoned. And I thought how awesome it is that we as chaplains, just by virtue of being a chaplain and having that calling, that name, that we evoke the presence of God, that we're reminders of the presence of God for people in a way that other people in the clinical team can't. The other visit, and I'll tell you briefly, it's kind of similar too, that brought me the same realization. Again, I was in the hospital. I was looking through my census. I saw this lady was about to go to surgery, had never met her before. So it was one of those cold visits, knocked on the door. So she was in the room with her adult son. I introduced myself. I said I was a chaplain. I see that you have surgery coming up. It turned out he was a pastor. The son was a pastor. We had some friends in common. Wow. He pastored in another town, but it's clergy life in Kentucky is not that big. So we knew some people in common, and we didn't have a lot of time because they were getting ready to whisk her away to surgery. So I prayed with them, and then the transporter was there. She was gone to surgery. Again, very ordinary, very brief visit. I didn't really think much of it. And then the next few days, I don't know, because we had those friends in common, somebody tagged me on a blog post that he had written. And he was always writing blog posts, and he wrote about this encounter. And what he said was that he was sitting there with his mom, and he was so anxious about what was happening. And he was thinking, well, I am the pastor, but who's going to pastor to me now? And when I knocked on the door, he thought, oh, it's a nurse or a doctor. But when I introduced myself as the chaplain, he felt immediately cared for by God. He felt that God was answering his prayer by sending somebody to see him. And again, I thought, okay, in residency, when I may have felt like I was even letting people down a little bit when I said I was a chaplain, because in my mind, I thought they were hoping for a nurse. They were hoping for the doctor to be coming in the door, not the chaplain. So to me, I was like, I'm just a chaplain. But in that encounter, I realized a doctor or a nurse couldn't have communicated the presence, the care of God in the way that I did just by saying I'm the chaplain. So those have always stayed with me and have really changed the way that I think of my role. Not that interventions aren't, helpful, or that you shouldn't study and figure out what, what obviously you do, but it's bigger than that.
It is interesting to see how I jokingly said that, oh, it's the ministry of presence. We just need to be present. And I think that could be used as an excuse for,
yes,
I don't know what I'm supposed to do, but I'm here. I showed up. Thank you. But in that case, no, I think it's very true where sometimes people just need that human connection. And that's what I'm hearing you say. That person needed a fellow clergy member to go, you're not alone, and I'm here to support you where you are. We're here. We're both servants of God. So how could I help you?
Right. How about you, John? What encounters have been meaningful for you?
It's funny when we were thinking about doing this, there are a few that really come to mind. And one was when I was doing my residency, and it was a very powerful one because it was high stress. And at the time, I was also I was feeling very much under stress the entire time.
Mm-hmm.
As I had mentioned before in our previous podcast, I kind of had a bunker mentality to my theology where I was just trying to hold on to everything. And how can I be the best Christian and hold on to my theology so tightly? And so I was dealing with all of that during all this. And then I was handling the overnight for this one case. And we found out that it was going to be there's a life flight that was coming in. And the chaplain, who's just very experienced and wonderfully wise for the ED and the pediatric ICU, just a great servant and a great coach. His name is Paul. He's like, hey, I'm going to come with you because this is my first unit in the residency. And so we go up to the pad and they come in. It's the first time that I'm seeing CPR happening on a child.
Oh.
And it's difficult because I didn't realize how violent CPR could be. We go in and I meet the family. And in with the family is 3 other chaplains. Like I think one of them may have been a police chaplain. One of them may have been a fire chaplain. I found what it was. But all these community chaplains, I'm this 30-year-old, I felt like a kid.
Right.
And Paul pulled me out in the hall. And he could see I was kind of like deer in the headlights going, I don't belong here. So I remember he said, hey, this is where you're working. This is where you're operating. You know this location. You're there to provide them care. You're there. So don't take this for granted. You're in exactly where you need to be. And I was just going, yeah, okay. But I walked in there and I'm just like, okay, I'm here to be present. I'm here to provide care. And so I don't remember much of what happened that time, but what I just remember that he cared enough that he saw where I was. And so it was kind of like what you're talking about, the chaplain providing care for the chaplain, especially
yes.
such a new chaplain as I was. I started going, okay, it's not about me. It's about being here with the patient, and it's about being here with the family. And so I would like to say that, so whenever I am in areas where I might walk into a situation where we've got chaplains who are far more experienced than I am, that's when I can, if anything, partner with them, see how I can leverage them, see what their experience is, see how their resources are. What I found with some of those chaplains was they were feeling very much the same that I was, deer in the headlights. So for me, it was beautiful to be able to be present, but it was also, I learned a lot of how can I get over myself and, or really not just get over myself, but how can I become more present in the midst of just a very impossibly difficult situation.
Yes. Another thing that I heard is hospitality and the gift and ministry of hospitality that we bring as chaplains in so many different ways. You were talking about, I know this location, I am here to care for you. So in a lot of ways, we do provide hospitality in terms of the patient in the healthcare facility or prison or wherever it is that you're providing care, but also spiritual hospitality, emotional hospitality, to make somebody welcome enough to express where they are, who they are.
Yes.
We also do that, I think, in a very unique way than other people on the team.
Oh, I completely agree. Yes. No, I agree. If anything, when people ask me what a chaplain does, and I have like a 5 to 10 second spiel, I say I'm like a religious, spiritual, humanist facilitator for people. One of the things that I can best, what do you need? And I'll provide it whatever way you need it. So
I like that.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty difficult encounter in itself. But when you think about your most difficult encounters, what comes to mind?
Part of it is, it's very funny because I remember, you're in Kentucky. I also worked in Kentucky for hospice. And I was also working with a lot of nurses who are very religious, very faith-filled. And so dealing with the expectations of those who have very specific beliefs on what religious people should be doing. So I do remember we had this patient where he was an atheist and he was proud of it. He was happy with it and his family was okay with it. And I think his family was also not religious at all. And he was actively dying in hospice. So for me, I wanted to see as my role is what are the family's needs that are being met? Sometimes the staff members, the team members their anxieties need to be met as well. So for me, one of my more difficult situations included where I was sitting in the room, the patient was very peaceful. Mm-hmm. And one of our nurse aides said, "Well, John, it's good to have you here. Would you like to lead us all in some prayer?"
Oh.
It wasn't the patient, it wasn't the family, it was the nurse aide who was suggesting it. And I smiled and I said, "Well, I want to make sure that the family is taken care of." I looked at the family and said, "No pressure at all whatsoever. Would that be helpful for you?" And the patient just went, just nodded. And I was like, "Okay, no pressure whatsoever, but okay." It was kind of like one of those, whatever makes you feel good.
Gotcha.
At the time, you're going, but it's whatever. This is your moment. It's not ours. So the family said, "Yeah, I think that'd be wonderful. I'm here to be with you and what you need." And so I ended up saying a nice simple prayer about, thank you very much for this time. We pray that the family would be a very wonderfully connecting time. And we asked all these things in your name. It was very it was a very non-sectarian prayer. Then I just engaged them in regular conversation and wanted to make sure that they were doing well emotionally. They were fine. The nurse aide was the one who needed a little bit more of the care.
Yeah.
So she was like, "Hey, do we need any more prayer?" And I said, I was like, "Let's talk." And so we ended up talking offline to the side. I said, what I hear you say is you're concerned about this patient. Sometimes it's okay for us to leave things in the hands of God. And so we don't need to worry about certain things. And plus, it's not really my role to try to put somebody where they're not. I don't need to do that. In fact, I shouldn't do that. I'm in a place where that would be essentially malpractice on my part. Didn't make that person feel better. Didn't make that nurse aide feel better. They were still feeling anxiety, but they at least knew that, that's not my role as a chaplain. Mm-hmm. So that was probably one of the more difficult, because in dealing with differences in expectations kind of ramped up my anxiety. So
yeah, I can totally relate to that. I can think back on several instances where somebody from the staff had some expectations of what I should be doing or saying, and were looking at me very significantly, trying to tell me what to do. And I've had to facilitate that. But also, sometimes it's the family that has some expectations of what you should. They pull you aside and they're like, can you ask them or tell them, or, they have an agenda and they want you to be the agenda facilitator, and then you have to facilitate that with them. So I understand.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. I had another situation where I didn't know if I was going to talk about this. It was a brand new patient I had just met, and he launched right into me. He just went in and he said, I'm afraid of going to hell. And I'm like, whoa, okay, whoa. Well, let's talk about that. It seems like you have some anxiety. Where's that coming from? How do I get right with God? And I'm going, oh, okay, what tradition do you come from? Well, I've been worshiping at this, and he mentioned his tradition. And I said, okay, well, what have they been saying? Like, what does it mean for you to get right with God? And he said, well, I think I need to pray and receive Jesus into my heart. Well, I said, okay, well, is that something that you want to do? I mean, I that's not my rule, but what are you thinking? It's like, well, yeah, let's do that. I'm going, this is one of the weirdest times I've ever provided care, because this is the only time this has ever happened. We ended up praying, and he ended up doing a lot of the praying. And speaking about that, his wife said, how the heck did you do that? I was like, he did this. This is all him. Don't blame us on me. He said, I've been trying to get him to do that for years. And I'm like, well, here's the thing. At times, we don't know what the patient needs. We don't know what each person needs. But he ended up dying that night, which was a very interesting. It seemed like somehow he received that peace that he needed, and that it seemed like his wife also needed as well. So I don't hold that up as a model of what to do. It's just more of going, when people are, there's that great ER episode, I think it is, where a guy's like, I need a real chaplain. And it's like, well, what does that person need at that exact moment? So anyway, yeah, I'd love to hear more. Like, what were some of your challenging instances?
I think some of the most challenging have been when I have felt unwelcome for a reason or another, either because, like you said, expectations. Sometimes the patients themselves have some expectations of what you're there to do that are misconceptions about what the chaplain does, so they don't welcome you immediately. Or because I'm female and I'm in a very conservative area, in a rural area, sometimes that has been a barrier for some people, and I have felt unwelcome in that way. And sometimes it's because people just feel like chaplains are almost like a bad omen. We're there for bad news. So there was one time in residency for me where, gosh, it's another child story. John, I think those are so difficult when it's a child that it's very sick or injured. But I was called to be with a family of a 2-year-old. They had an accident on an ATV, very serious accident, and the child was on life support. And I walked in and I introduced myself as the chaplain, and the grandmother of the child immediately went, no, not the chaplain, because she said they called the chaplain for my mother and she died. And in her mind, that was almost like I was bad luck just because I showed up. So those are always difficult. But I think to me, by far, the most difficult visit that I've had was after my dad died. Visiting with this family, because as a chaplain, there are times when you understand that some countertransference is happening in the visit. We learn about that in CPE, and you are able to recognize it in the moment when somebody reminds you of a family member or a family dynamic or something that you're struggling with, and you can see that in the visit and you can separate it. But I had never really experienced it as strongly as after my dad died. And what happened is my dad died in 2020. So it was during the pandemic, and he died in Brazil, where I'm from. So I was trying to figure out what to do and whether we should go there or not. And we were doing video calls. He was in the hospital for pneumonia, aspiration pneumonia, but he had ALS for many years. So it was complications of that. And I got the news that he had died. There was somebody with him when he died. It was, I think, a nurse's aide or a tech. So he wasn't completely alone.
Good.
But it was devastating to me because for a couple of reasons. For one, I always thought that I would see my dad again alive before he died. And, I knew the seriousness of his condition. If anybody should have been prepared, I should have been prepared. But I still felt like I was going to see him again. But the other reason why I really struggled with it was I've been by the bedside of so many people taking their last breaths. I worked in hospice for many years, and then in the hospital, I have been there for so many people as they're dying, and I assumed, I shouldn't have, but I assumed that I would be able to do that for my dad, and that I felt like I should have been there for him when he died. How can I provide this care for so many other people and not for my own dad, and have him die in a hospital bed kind of alone? He wasn't completely alone. I was really struggling with that. So I came back to the States after the funeral, and I was visiting with the palliative care team. We got called in to see this family that had decided on compassionate extubation. So the patient was on life support. He was not getting better. They had decided to extubate. And I came in, and at first it was, just one of those ordinary visits where with palliative care we had done so many times, where we're introducing ourselves, we're answering questions. This was not a family we had met before. We are talking about, what the process is going to be like when they extubate. We're caring for them. So the team comes in, they extubate the patient. I had prayed with them. And then after that, we were lingering kind of in the room and just still taking care of them. And palliative care doctors just watching the patient to make sure that he's comfortable. So it was a man and his wife, and I think about 3 children were present. And I was just talking with them a little bit, and I was just looking at them around the room, and his 2 daughters were on either side of the bed, and they were like stroking his arms and talking to him and just spending time with him as he was dying. And all of a sudden, it really hit me very strongly, like, this is what I should have done. Like, I should have been there for my dad when he died, and I wasn't. And I was like, okay, once it hit me that strongly, I realized I am now making this about me. Like, my grief is getting in the way. It's like, I've got to get out of here. I can't minister to these people anymore. And it was the first time that had ever happened to me in a visit where I felt like I am not going to be able to.
It's good that you recognize that. That takes a lot of wisdom to be able to go, I need to step out right now. That was good on you.
I kind of waited for like an opportune moment, and I excused myself politely, and I walked out the door, and I looked for the closest bathroom. I knew where it was, and I went into the bathroom and I just sobbed. It just really hit me all of a sudden. But that's how grief is. And a lot of times when we are tending to other people's griefs, our grief does come up too. And you have to find a way to untangle that, debrief that, have somebody to talk to, or care for yourself in some other way. But for me, it was running to the bathroom.
That takes great wisdom to be able to go, okay, I'm not going to be helpful in this situation as much as I could be. And being able to go, okay, it's going to be far better for me to process this separately. It is interesting. When I was a fellow over at this children's hospital, I had just had my son at the time was, I believe, 1.5, almost 2 years old. And so I had just been hired on to do my fellowship there. And I remember seeing the first death that I had to take care of. At this particular hospital, whenever there's a death, the chaplain is there because the chaplain helps facilitate a lot of the paperwork, provides care for the staff, and when the body goes to the morgue, when the funeral home comes to pick up the body, the chaplain's always there, so the person's never alone. And so I went there because there was this 2-year-old who was a spitting image of my son who is actively dying. And so I was like, I walked in and I'm going, wow, okay, am I going to be able to do this? Like similar to what you were doing, am I going to be able to be present? And I was able to, because I was like, okay, this is not my child, but how can I utilize the appropriate use of self in this situation? And so, I worked through it. I used that as a means to create some good empathy and compassion for the mother there, her son, and we were able to facilitate the end-of-life packet materials. What faith tradition do you come from? Oh, well, we come from this one. Okay. Is there anything that I could provide that would be helpful for you? Oh, well, could you do X, Y, and Z? Yes, I would love to. So in that instance, I wasn't necessarily triggered. There have been times where I'm like, nope, okay, I need to go to a different place because I need to bow out for right now and go somewhere else because I'm not going to be as useful as I could be. It takes a lot of wisdom, Elise, to do that. I would love to hear, do you have instances of times when you provided care, it was just odd or it was funny? It was one where you're sitting there going, what's happening here? Or is this really happening? What in the world?
Oh my gosh, there have been so many of those people who talk about things that are, topics that you never imagined you'd be having a conversation about, to getting bit by dogs. And there are a couple that come to mind as being odd. So one was also when I was a hospice chaplain. I called and I said, I'm the chaplain. Can I come for a visit? They said, yes. I knocked on the door. I said, I'm here. I'm the chaplain. And she said, great. I just started giving my mother a bath. And maybe you can help me with that. And I said, okay. But in my mind, I'm thinking, am I allowed to do this? Because, I'm a brand new hospice chaplain. And I don't know, that is not really in my scope. Like, I don't know about, there are techniques that they teach the nurses' aides about how to turn people and all these things. And I hadn't been taught that. So I'm a little worried, but I want to help. So I just tell her, I don't want to hurt her. You tell me what to do. I'll let you hold her. And so we're giving this woman a bath together. And I'm talking to the patient some. I'm talking to the daughter. I'm trying to follow her directions. And so I'm asking questions, trying to get to know them. And then at some point in the visit, I ask if they would like me to pray with them, and I pray. So we do this whole visit while we are both bathing this woman. And we pray, and then I leave. Okay, fine. It's just like, okay, I've never had this experience before. Like, they didn't teach me this in residency, but okay, here we are. And then the nurse comes to visit that family a little later, and I realized what had happened because the nurse tells me that she walks in and introduces herself because, again, this was a family we had not met before. And the daughter of the patient tells the nurse, oh, the nurse's aide was here earlier, except she was very sweet. She prayed with my mother, but she didn't know anything about how to bathe her. So, it didn't matter that I told her I was a chaplain on the phone, that I said I was a chaplain when I walked in. She still thought it was the nurse's aide. Being young and female, that's part of it. Another kind of odd visit that comes to mind is back in the hospital with the palliative care team. We went to see this family, and there was a family member with the patient, and I don't remember the relation anymore, but we were there as a team. So the doctor, the nurse, and myself. And at some point, this family member tells us that she's a prophet, and she has a prophecy for each of us. Oh, wow. So, okay. Yes. So she starts prophesizing, and I don't recall anymore what she prophesized for the doctor and for the nurse. But for me, she said, you are going to get promoted in your job. So then she finishes prophesizing. I don't remember exactly how the visit ended, but we walked out of there kind of like, what was that? Because not to disparage anybody's spiritual gifts.
Of course.
Yes, it felt very random and kind of unusual for us. And honestly, like we were walking out talking about the prophecies, right? And we're like talking about how kind of ludicrous they were. And so for the doctor and the nurse, again, I can't recall anymore. But for me, it was like, okay, I'm going to get promoted. Like, I'm the head of my department already. Like, I was the manager of our pastoral care department. I had only been on my job for maybe a little over a year. I was not looking for another job, and there wasn't really another job that I could get promoted into at the hospital. But I was like, okay, I'm going to get promoted, blah, blah, blah. Well, turns out that like less than a year later, like a few months later, this new role was created in my organization that was a regional advanced care planning facilitator role or a coordinator. And my boss told me I should apply for this. I applied, I got the job, and I never thought about that prophecy until sometime later. I was talking with that doctor and the nurse from the palliative care team, and the doctor was like, do you remember that prophecy? And I was like, oh yeah. And she was like, hey, look at you. You got promoted.
That's great.
So who knows?
It's great. Yeah, I love it. How
about you, John?
I hear you. Like, the fun part about being in hospice is you meet people where they are in their homes. And so you get to see them exactly in their home environment. I was thinking about this one time when I was a chaplain where I was working with the Army Reserve, and I was over there. They used to call it drill, going to your weekend drill. Now it's called battle assembly.
Okay.
And I was visiting one of my units, and a lot of what we do is, if you haven't been there yet, you just walk around and you get to know the people. You just talk to them, and and if they're doing any activities, you just join them in the activities. It's a lot of fun. Like if they're doing land navigation, you don't do land navigation with them. You succeed or you fail. They see that you're doing it with them, and there's that rapport, the camaraderie. It's a lot of fun. And I believe they were working with some of the land navigation materials. And so I'd occasionally just talk to them. I was like, oh, why is this important? We have GPSs. We have daggers. Why do we need to have this? And so some of them were like, yeah, well, those aren't perfect. We need to have compasses and maps so that we're like, good job, good answer. And so one soldier pulled me aside and said, hey, chaplain, I'm a Norse pagan, and tomorrow is the pagan festival, so I'm going to need a bottle of honey mead wine. I'm gonna need that so that I can worship in my own way. And I was like, well, this is interesting. Okay. I mean, are you serious? Okay. Yeah. You need honey mead? I could go to the liquor store and get some. I'll buy it. I'm okay with that. That might be a little boundary issue, but I'll buy it. If you're genuine and you need mead, but here's the thing. I won't participate in this service. I'll be in the background, and I'll be watching to make sure that you're not just going to get plowed and plastered. But it's, and I'll help you set it up. I'll help you take it down. My chaplain assistant, now they're called religious affairs specialists. I'll help them, do the setup and tear down, whatever. But if you're serious, I'll get you some mead. And this person was like, they kept on sidestepping. I said, but okay, let's go back to this because you asked me for something. I'll make sure that you're being taken care of. I don't know very much about Norse paganism, but hey, if you need something, I'll take care of you.
He probably was not expecting that, do you think?
I don't think so. I think, I don't want to guess on what their intentions were, but part of it, I think they might have just been trying to see, okay, does this chaplain care for anybody who's not a Christian and not a fill in the blank? Well, is this chaplain going to take care of me where I am? So I ended up telling this person, I was like, I'm serious. Like, this is my role. I want to take care of you. And this person was like, no, we're good. We're good, chaplain. But after that, what I loved was this particular soldier, who is a non-commissioned officer, started going, hey, talking to their soldiers, like, hey, you got some issues going on. You need to go talk to that chaplain over there. And started, oh, the chaplain's cool. Like, you could talk to the chaplain about whatever you need. The chaplain will take care of you. And I was like, yeah. And I love that because I felt like I was really doing my job, being able to, even though I didn't get them honey mead, but showing that I was willing to, and also willing to say, like, I'm not a pushover. Like, we're not going to be doing shots, but I am here. Like, if you need something sacramentally or religiously or spiritually, or if as a humanist, we're here to be there with you. So that always made me smile.
And you got some referrals out of that.
Yeah. And it was very funny because, especially when a lot of the soldiers know that as a chaplain, if you're a safe place to go with vulnerabilities, and also if you admit that you have vulnerabilities, and they see you fail, when they see that you're not the all-knowing person, and you make mistakes and you admit to them.
Absolutely.
Like when I admitted to a lot of my soldiers, I was like, yeah, I failed out of air assault school, and it happens. Tell me about a time when you failed. They go, oh, let me talk to you about this. That's when you really start bridging that gap of being able to go, sometimes the best chaplains are the ones who are willing to just being able to bridge that gap.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good way to put it, John. The bridge is a good metaphor. That support and just the ability to accompany somebody on their journey. So, yeah, you never know. That's somebody the other day, I was being part of a peer review committee, for a chaplain who's been a chaplain for a very long time, and she said that she really likes how random pastoral care can be, and it really can be. I mean,
It can be.
one moment it's funny, it's unusual, it's odd. The other moment it's very meaningful and sacred and beautiful. Then the next moment somebody just really wants an ordinary conversation. They're so tired of difficult news and difficult conversations, and they just want to talk to somebody like a normal person. They want to be seen as a person and not a patient or a fill in the blank. So yeah, you might be blessing a baby and celebrating 1 minute, and then the next minute you're ushering somebody who's on their last breath. It's a very interesting job.
We didn't have this on the docket, but is there a time or a visit that, if you ever need to feel like that helped confirm your calling as a chaplain, something that you look back and you go, if you need some encouragement, you look back and go, okay, I was able to make a great difference in that moment.
Mm-hmm. There have been a few moments like that. And it's funny because for some of them, I feel like it was with people who couldn't even communicate, because I felt like I was able to care for them and be with them at a time when other people, again, I go back to those interventions kind of thing, because that tools, right? Because in some ways, when somebody's not able to communicate with you, some tools are not helpful anymore, but the human connection is still there. And I felt like I had more time and ability, and also the role of being able to make that human connection with somebody when somebody else on the team would not be able to do that. But at other times, it has been when people have been able to tell me, and people don't always tell you that it's made a difference for them. People are not even able, I think, sometimes to verbalize how spiritual care has impacted them. So most of the time you don't get this, but every now and then you get somebody who will tell you something. And like, I remember this lady who had dementia at a nursing home, and I was visiting with her. She was in hospice care, and after we talked and we prayed, I think we may have even like sang some hymns or something. She was so touched that at the end of the visit, she said, "I will always remember you for the rest of my life." I was so touched by that, because I think, she really meant it. Like, it had made a big difference for her. And so when I receive a word like that, when somebody's able to tell me very clearly that the time that I spent with them or the visit that I had with them was meaningful, I try to write that down somewhere so I can remember it later or look through it later when you don't get those, when you don't get the validation or you're not really sure if you're in the right place. It's nice to go back and revisit and read through some of those things.
Yeah. No, I think especially within a very qualitative job that we're calling our profession has of chaplaincy, those qualitative backgrounds, those qualitative stories really help to provide those opportunities to go, oh, okay, I'm not just doing visits, I'm providing care. I remember having a patient where this was a situation where I had grown to know the caregiver very well, because we had this patient in hospice for a long time, and so I ended up establishing a great camaraderie and rapport with the caregiver, and the patient themselves. They were fine, but the more of the care was provided for the caregiver, which all too often happens in hospice. And so this particular person, they call themselves a Christian humanist. They loved the tradition of Christianity, but they were very much an agnostic. They'd seen, like, evolutionarily, yes, this is what I consider as, Christianity is a great tradition, but I just can't believe in it. And so this person and I would sit for about an hour, just talking. And part of what I saw my role with this person was, how can I provide care in being able to work through their relationships with their family of origin, the relationship with their spouse, and how can I enrich those relationships? I wasn't trying to change them away from being an agnostic under any circumstances. It was really just, how can I make them healthier and a stronger person. And so we had probably a good time where we just sat and talked. And a lot of it was just them expressing their frustrations and be going, okay, yeah, that's valid. You're not crazy. You're not crazy at all. You're going through a lot of things here. So tell me more about your experience of this and how are you coping with it? It was always very encouraging to provide that kind of care, because if ever I've wondered about what a chaplain does, it's those long-term relationships where it takes time to build that kind of trust. Because this person knew that I wasn't trying to change them, but I was more trying to help them.
And at the same time, sometimes there are visits where you only have that one shot. Like you only meet that person or that family this one time, or maybe it's more than one time, but it's still brief. And you don't have the opportunity to have a long-term relationship with them or develop trust over a period of time. So there are times when we have to build trust and rapport very quickly, which is why one time I read something about chaplains being called the intimate strangers. And I really like that, because at times that is, you are a complete stranger to that person, and yet you're in such an intimate, sacred moment a lot of times in that person's life, and the way that we care for them, it can be very intimate. So yeah, the intimate strangers, I think, applies too. And I think about that sometimes when I mean, it's amazing how quickly we can get into very deep or difficult conversations or see a glimpse of somebody's soul and heart in a very brief period of time.
It is a cliche within chaplaincy, but it is going in and almost like you need to take off your shoes because you're on holy ground. But it is entering this idea of we're in a very intimate place, we're in a very sacred place, but we're also in a very special place that we need to make sure that we're safe people to be around in some of those dark times and what that person needs in the moment, whether that's a prophetic figure, whether that's a compassionate figure, whether that's simply, my son loves this book called The Rabbit Listened. It's where all these other animals are trying to tell somebody who's in grief what they should be doing. And spoiler alert, then a little rabbit walks up and just sits. And the person just notices that the rabbit is there and listened. Sometimes we just need to be that rabbit listening.
Ah, nice. I'll have to look for that book.
It's a great book. Yeah, my son really enjoys that book. It's the pictures are also wonderful. So,
good to know. So, John, I loved hearing your stories today, and it helps me know you more as a chaplain. And I hope that our listeners have related to some of those too. And I'd love to hear more stories. Maybe they can send us some stories too on
that would be wonderful.
The voicemail or comments.
For me, it's always wonderful to hear how different clinicians and how different professional chaplains have operated and have worked in their different settings. And so it's been encouraging for me to hear what you've been doing, Elise. And yeah, to those who are listening, I want to invite you that you are welcome anytime that you would like to share your stories. Then you are welcome to do so. If you have any ideas of what you would like to hear about in terms of this podcast, then yes, it will be in the description below. It's also for those audio listeners. It is 502-536-7508. That's 502-536-7508. And if you like this episode or if you have feedback for us, then we encourage you to like, subscribe, hit that bell. And we would love to continue to enrich this community, because this is your community as well as it's ours.
Right. I agree. So to finish off this episode, John, what's giving you life these days?
Well, that's a wonderful question. I think it's funny. These days, I've really been enjoying spending time with my older son. My older son and I, we have been able to go running. I'm running him to his care place, and because it's the summertime. And so during that time, he and I sometimes we play I Spy or
Nice.
youngling. He also he does cute little things, like he has a teddy bear that he throws up, and so I snuggle the teddy bear and I go, I'm getting snuggled. And so just those small interactions that happen with him have been giving me life. Especially having a new baby has been it's tiring. So being able to have those times with my other son, with whom I can really interact more, have been beautiful.
So that's lovely.
What about you, Alicia? What's been giving you life and enrichment?
So these last few days, actually more than a few days, but I've really enjoyed seeing the flowers bloom around my house. I don't know a lot about flowers. I don't have a green thumb or anything, but we have some beautiful flowers, and I've been very diligent in watering them and caring for them and trying to learn how much to water and all those things. But I've really enjoyed seeing them come into blooming. Right now, my hydrangeas are finally blooming and they're looking really pretty. But also, I've been reconnecting with one of my childhood friends from Brazil through an app, like it's called a Marco Polo app. It's a video chat. And for the past several months, we've been sending just videos to each other back and forth. And it's just been so nice to reconnect with her that way. I mean, I had seen her on social media and we would speak some on social media, but it's a little different when we can be more personal and send each other videos and just talk with each other like we hadn't done in years. So I've really enjoyed that.
Yeah. There's probably a wonderful connection too when you can just connect with another person in Portuguese and like a childhood connection. So I love that. That's wonderful. Sometimes it helps to have a sense of humor about where we're approaching things. I enjoyed this. This was a quote. I don't know where it comes from, but it made me smile. It reads, "Don't ever forget, you're a ghost driving a meat-coated skeleton made from stardust, riding a rock, hurling through space. Fear nothing." Now, I enjoyed that just because it just made me smile.
Fear nothing. I love it. Well, thanks everyone for listening, and we'll see you next time.